Revenge Girls Stories.
My name is Aria, 29 years old and a veteran of the United States Army. I never thought my military service would be questioned at my own father's will reading, but there stood Connor, my brother, pointing his finger at me. "No benefits, no claims. She's a fake vet," he jeered loudly. What Connor failed to notice was my lawyer quietly slipping an unopened envelope to the judge. As the judge read its contents, his face went pale. "Officers, seal this court immediately." Before I tell you how that envelope changed my life forever, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happened next in this courtroom showdown. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, our family seemed picture perfect from the outside. My father, William, my mother, Grace, my brother Connor, who was 4 years older than me, and myself. We lived in a charming colonial house with a wraparound porch, the epitome of suburban success. Dad owned a thriving real estate development company that specialized in luxury residential properties, a business he had built through sheer determination and an eye for prime locations. Everything changed when I turned 16. Mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and within 8 months, she was gone. The loss shattered our family in ways we never recovered from. Dad buried himself in work, spending 18-hour days at the office to avoid the silence at home. Connor, 20 at the time, immediately positioned himself as Dad's successor, dropping out of college to learn the business from the ground up. And then there was me, suddenly motherless during those crucial teenage years. I found refuge in my studies, excelling in everything from mathematics to debate team. Dad noticed Connor's dedication to the business, but my academic achievements seemed to fade into the background. It wasn't malicious neglect. He just related more naturally to Connor, who shared his passion for real estate and development. "Connor has the instincts for this business," Dad would say during family dinners. "He understands what it takes to succeed in this industry." Those words cut deeper than Dad probably intended, not because I necessarily wanted to join the real estate business, but because it felt like I wasn't even considered worthy of his legacy. The favoritism was subtle but persistent. Connor received a brand new Mercedes for his 21st birthday, while I got a reliable but used Honda for mine. Dad sought Connor's input on major business decisions, treating him like a partner, while my suggestions were politely acknowledged and quickly forgotten. When Connor wanted his own apartment near the office, Dad covered the rent without question. When I mentioned wanting to move closer to my university, Dad questioned why I needed independence when home was perfectly adequate. As years passed, the tension between Connor and me intensified. What began as normal sibling competition evolved into something more poisonous. Connor seemed to need not just Dad's approval, but his exclusive attention. Every success I achieved was somehow diminished by Connor's commentary. When I graduated as valedictorian, Connor convinced Dad they had a crucial investor meeting that same afternoon. They arrived 20 minutes late, missing my speech entirely. Connor's excuse about traffic was transparently false, and the disappointment in my eyes was met with cold indifference in his. I earned a full scholarship to State University, majoring in international business with a focus on Middle Eastern studies. The coursework fascinated me, opening my mind to global perspectives and complex geopolitical situations. When I graduated summa cum laude, Dad attended alone. Connor was supposedly handling an emergency with a major development project. During my senior year, a military recruiter visited our campus. Captain Victoria spoke about purpose, challenge, and the opportunity to serve something greater than personal ambition. The structure appealed to me, along with the chance to use my language skills and analytical abilities in meaningful ways. When I announced my decision to join the Army after graduation, Connor's reaction was immediate and cutting. "Really, Arya? The military? This is just another desperate attempt to get Dad's attention through some dramatic gesture. Not everything revolves around Dad's approval, Connor, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my anger. Some people make decisions based on their principles, not just what benefits them financially. Dad's response was conflicted. Concern for my safety battled with pride he struggled to express openly. Are you certain about this path, Arya? Military service is a serious commitment with real risks. I'm certain, Dad. This is something I need to do for myself. The day I left for basic training, Dad embraced me tightly, whispering, "Your mother would have been incredibly proud of this decision." Connor offered only a brief, formal handshake and a warning: don't expect to come running back when you discover how harsh reality can be outside your academic bubble. I shouldered my duffel bag and walked toward the transport bus, hope mixing with determination. Maybe in the Army I would finally find the recognition and respect that had always eluded me at home. Maybe there, my contributions would truly matter. What I couldn't foresee was how completely that decision would transform not only my own life, but the entire dynamic of our fractured family. The military would test me in ways I never imagined, forge me into someone I barely recognized, and ultimately provide the key to unlocking secrets that would change everything. Basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia was every bit as demanding as advertised, and exactly what my soul needed. The physical challenges pushed me beyond limits I didn't know existed, while the mental discipline provided structure for the chaos that had defined my civilian life. For the first time ever, I was evaluated purely on my own performance, not in comparison to my brother's accomplishments. My international business background and language proficiency caught the attention of my instructors immediately. After completing basic training with honors, I was selected for advanced specialized training in military intelligence. This wasn't the career path I had originally envisioned, but I embraced it completely.
The intelligence training was intellectually demanding and emotionally fulfilling in ways I had never experienced. We learned surveillance techniques, data analysis, and communication protocols that required both analytical precision and physical endurance. My academic background proved invaluable, but more importantly, I discovered I had natural instinct for this type of work. 8 months into my specialized training, I met Major Victoria, who would become both my commanding officer and the mentor I had always needed. 15 years my senior, Victoria possessed the kind of quiet authority that inspired respect rather than demanded it. She recognized potential in me that I couldn't see myself. "You have exceptional analytical skills, Taylor," she told me during a particularly challenging night exercise. "But more importantly, you combine intelligence with empathy. That's a rare and valuable combination in our field of work." My first assignment took me to a base in Virginia, where I worked as part of a team analyzing communications intercepts from various global hotspots. The work was classified, but intellectually stimulating. I was contributing to operations that had real-world impact, and for the first time in my life, I felt like my abilities were being fully utilized. Communication with home during this period was limited and stilted. Dad sent occasional emails expressing concern for my safety and pride in my service. Connor rarely contacted me directly, usually adding brief, impersonal notes to Dad's messages. I convinced myself that the distance didn't matter, that I had found my true calling in the military. 3 years into my service came the assignment that would define my career and change my life forever. Our intelligence unit received critical information about a terrorist cell operating near the Syrian border. The mission was classified at the highest levels, with only essential personnel briefed on the full scope and potential consequences.
Victoria and I were assigned to a specialized 6-person team tasked with infiltrating the area to verify intelligence and provide real-time analysis for a major operation. What was supposed to be a routine reconnaissance mission became something far more dangerous when our cover was blown. The attack came at dawn. Explosions shattered the morning calm, followed by sustained automatic weapons fire from multiple positions. Victoria was coordinating our emergency evacuation when the second blast hit, bringing down part of our temporary command structure. Through the smoke and debris, I could see 3 team members were down, including Victoria, who was trapped beneath a collapsed support beam. My training took over, suppressing fear and panic. I managed to evacuate 2 wounded team members to the designated rally point before returning for Victoria. The building was unstable, groaning ominously as enemy fire continued to rake our position. "Leave me, Taylor," Victoria ordered when I reached her, pain evident in her voice. "That's a direct order. Get to the extraction point now." "With all due respect, Major, that's not happening," I replied, working frantically to free her from the debris. "You taught me that we never leave anyone behind." What happened next remains fragmented in my memory. Another explosion, much closer this time. I remember throwing myself over Victoria as the world erupted around us. Something struck me hard in the back and shoulder. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but I maintained consciousness long enough to see our rescue helicopter arriving. I awakened 4 days later in a military hospital in Germany. The medical damage was extensive. 4 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, severe shrapnel wounds across my back and right shoulder, and a traumatic brain injury from the blast concussion. The doctors informed me I was fortunate to be alive. Victoria survived as well, though her injuries required multiple surgeries. When she was finally able to visit my hospital room, she brought news that left me speechless. "The intelligence we gathered before the attack was absolutely crucial," she said quietly. "Despite our compromised position, it led to one of the most significant counterterrorism operations of the past 5 years. Your actions saved not only our team, but potentially countless civilian lives." What I didn't understand then was that due to the highly classified nature of our mission, all records of my involvement in injuries were sealed under national security protocols. My medical treatment and rehabilitation would be documented using generic classification codes. The true nature of my service would remain hidden behind layers of official secrecy. Recovery was a long and painful process. 8 months of surgeries and physical therapy, followed by another 6 months of cognitive rehabilitation for the brain injury. The visible scars would eventually fade, but some damage would be permanent. I still carry shrapnel fragments in my right shoulder, and certain sounds can trigger severe headaches, lasting reminders of that devastating morning. During one of her visits, Victoria brought a small presentation case. Inside was a medal, one of the highest decorations a soldier can receive, awarded in a private ceremony attended only by personnel with appropriate security clearance. "You earned this, Arya," Victoria said, her eyes bright with pride and something that might have been regret. The knowledge that my sacrifice would never receive public recognition. "I was just doing my job," I responded automatically, though we both understood it had been much more than that. "The nature of your service and this commendation will remain classified indefinitely," she explained carefully. "Your official military record will show honorable service and a medical discharge, but none of the operational specifics. Even the Veterans Administration won't have access to classified details." I grasped the implications immediately. To the outside world, including my family, I would appear to be simply another veteran with an honorable discharge. No special recognition, no public acknowledgement of sacrifice, no explanation for the ongoing effects of injuries they could never know about. I didn't serve for recognition, I said, and meant it sincerely. After 6 years of military service, I received an honorable medical discharge with carefully worded documentation that protected classified information. My official military record indicated I had served with distinction, but contained no details about specific operations or the true nature of my injuries. As I prepared to return to civilian life, Victoria, now a lieutenant colonel, made me a solemn promise. If you ever need anything at all, you contact me immediately. We take care of our own, Arya. Don't ever forget that principle. Returning home after 6 years in the military proved more challenging than any mission I had undertaken overseas. The structured environment of Army life had become my foundation, and civilian freedoms felt strangely disorienting. Basic decisions like choosing what to wear each morning or deciding when to eat required conscious thought processes that had been automatic in military life. The hypervigilance that had kept me alive in dangerous situations didn't simply disappear because I was back on safe American soil. I found a modest apartment in our hometown, about 15 minutes from Dad's house. My military savings provided financial stability while I navigated the transition to civilian life. The Department of Veterans Affairs offered helpful transition services, but I couldn't discuss my classified injuries, which complicated receiving appropriate support for my ongoing medical needs. My first visit to Dad's house revealed changes that caught me off guard. At 61, he appeared much older than his chronological age. His once strong, confident posture had become slightly stooped, and worry lines had deepened around his eyes. The real estate business remained successful, now significantly expanded under Connor's aggressive management approach. However, Dad had stepped back from daily operations considerably. Doctor's orders, he explained when I inquired about his reduced involvement. Blood pressure issues and some heart irregularities. Connor handles most of the major decisions now, which gives me time to focus on my health. Speaking of Connor, my brother was conspicuously absent during my homecoming. He had purchased an impressive house in the most exclusive neighborhood in town, complete with his wife, Sarah, and their twin daughters, a family I had only seen in holiday photographs during my deployment. According to Dad, Connor made brief appearances for Sunday family dinners, but was otherwise completely absorbed in expanding the business empire and managing his own household responsibilities. During those initial weeks home, I established a comfortable daily routine of morning runs limited by my shoulder mobility, job applications, and evening conversations with Dad. We developed an easy rhythm that felt different from the strained interactions of my youth. Dad seemed genuinely interested in hearing about my military experiences, though I could only share carefully edited versions that omitted classified details. "I worried about you constantly while you were deployed," he admitted one evening as we sat together on his back patio. "I kept your commissioning photograph on my nightstand so I could say goodnight to you every evening, just like when you were a little girl." His confession touched something deep within me. All those years of feeling undervalued compared to Connor, and here was clear evidence that Dad had carried me in his thoughts and heart throughout my absence. As weeks transformed into months, Dad and I grew closer than we had ever been during my childhood. I assisted with household maintenance, accompanied him to medical appointments, and listened to stories about Mom that he had never shared previously. In Connor's frequent absence, Dad seemed to truly see me as an individual for the first time. One evening, approximately 8 months after my return, Dad raised the subject of the family business. Connor has accomplished impressive things with the company, he began, his tone thoughtful and measured. He's expanded our residential portfolio, increased our workforce, secured major commercial contracts. But his approach is different from mine, more focused on profit margins than people and community relationships. I nodded uncertainly, unsure where this conversation was leading. The thing is, Aria, I've been observing you since you came home. The way you analyze problems, your natural leadership instincts, your ethical approach to decision making. You possess qualities I never fully recognized or appreciated before. The military tends to develop those characteristics, I replied, deflecting the compliment. Perhaps, but I believe they were always part of who you are. He paused, selecting his words carefully. I've been reconsidering the future direction of the company, thinking about legacy and what really matters. That conversation marked the beginning of Dad's gradual inclusion of me in business discussions. Nothing formal initially, just requesting my perspective on personnel issues or asking me to review contract proposals. When I suggested developing a program to recruit and train military veterans, Dad enthusiastically endorsed the idea, immediately allocating resources without hesitation. Connor's reaction to my growing involvement was predictably hostile. During his infrequent Sunday visits, he made cutting remarks about my lack of construction industry experience or questioned the relevance of military leadership in civilian business contexts. Playing soldier for a few years doesn't qualify someone to make important business decisions, he commented during one particularly tense family dinner. Dad's just including you out of guilt for all the time you were away. Dad surprised both of us by firmly striking the table with his palm. That's quite enough, Connor. Your sister served this country with honor and distinction, and she's earned both my respect and yours. The decisions I make regarding my company are exclusively mine to make. The sharp rebuke left Connor visibly angry, but temporarily silenced. Following that confrontation, his Sunday visits became increasingly sporadic, with business emergencies and family obligations serving as convenient excuses for his absence. As Dad's health continued its gradual decline, our late evening conversations took on deeper significance. During one such discussion, roughly 1 year after my return, he broached the delicate subject of estate planning. I've been meeting regularly with Michael, he referred to his longtime attorney and close friend, to make some important changes to my will and business succession plans. Dad, we don't need to discuss such matters, I protested, feeling uncomfortable with the direction of our conversation. Yes, we absolutely do, Aria. I need you to understand my reasoning and thought process. His expression was unusually serious. I've spent my entire adult life building something meaningful that would survive beyond me, something that would provide security for my family and livelihood for our employees. For many years, I automatically assumed that meant leaving everything to Connor. He took a measured breath before continuing. But I've come to realize that assumption isn't necessarily what's best for the future of the company or the people who depend on it for their financial security. Connor has changed significantly. The values I built this business on don't seem to guide his decisions anymore.
Over the following weeks, Dad occasionally mentioned his meetings with Michael, but never elaborated on the specific changes he was making to his estate plans. Connor somehow learned about these attorney visits, and his attitude toward me became increasingly aggressive and suspicious. Twice, he appeared unannounced at Dad's house while I was there, demanding private conversations that left Dad visibly drained and emotionally upset. I could hear raised voices from behind the closed study door, though I couldn't make out specific words. Whatever Connor was saying during these confrontations was clearly distressing Dad significantly. During this tense period, I received several check-in calls from Victoria, monitoring my adjustment to civilian life. During one conversation, I shared my growing concerns about the deteriorating family dynamics. "Be very careful, Arya," she advised with the seriousness I remembered from our military days. "Family disputes over inheritance and business succession can escalate quickly and turn extremely ugly. Document everything, especially any threatening behavior or concerning statements from your brother." Her warning proved to be remarkably prescient. As Dad's health continued its gradual decline, Connor's visits became increasingly confrontational and hostile. He openly accused me of manipulating Dad during his vulnerable state, of systematically turning him against his own son for personal gain. I made every effort to avoid direct confrontation, focusing instead on ensuring Dad's remaining time was as peaceful and comfortable as possible. But Connor's anger was becoming harder to ignore or deflect. One evening, approximately 18 months after my return home, Dad and I were watching his favorite classic Western film when he reached over and gently took my hand. "I'm proud of you, Arya," he said with quiet sincerity. "I wish I had expressed that sentiment more often throughout your life. You deserve to hear it much more frequently than you did." Those would be among the last meaningful words we shared. Dad suffered a massive cardiac arrest in his sleep that very night. By the time I discovered him the following morning, he was already gone. The funeral was held on a crisp October day, the kind of perfect autumn weather Dad had always loved for working on outdoor projects. The church was filled beyond capacity with people whose lives he had touched over the decades. Employees, business clients, longtime friends, and neighbors from throughout the community. I stood near the entrance, greeting mourners and accepting their condolences, while Connor and Sarah arrived conspicuously late, making their entrance just as the memorial service was beginning. Throughout the ceremony, I noticed Connor engaging in whispered conversations with various business associates, his demeanor appearing more calculating than grief-stricken. When the time came for our family eulogies, Connor spoke first, presenting himself as the devoted son who had sacrificed his personal ambitions to help build the family legacy alongside his father. He mentioned me only briefly, referring to my extended absence during military service as if it had been a personal choice rather than service to our country. When my turn came, I spoke simply about Dad's kindness, his incredible work ethic, and the fundamental values he had tried to instill in both his children. I shared memories of our time together after my return from military service, being careful not to emphasize our renewed closeness in a way that might seem deliberately hurtful to Connor. At the reception following the service, Connor made his first public attack on my military credentials. As I was discussing my transition back to civilian life with Frank, Dad's oldest friend and former business partner, Connor interrupted our conversation. "Don't let her mislead you, Frank," Connor interjected with a cold smile. "From what I understand, her military service was pretty comfortable, pushing paperwork in some administrative office while real soldiers were doing the actual fighting overseas." Frank appeared visibly uncomfortable, but I maintained my composure despite feeling my face flush with anger. "Everyone serves in different capacities, Connor. Each role contributes to the overall mission's success." "Sure, absolutely," Connor replied with obvious sarcasm. "I'm just pointing out how convenient it is that you managed to return home without any visible injuries after supposedly serving in active combat zones. Some people might find that circumstance rather suspicious." I felt my anger rising, but years of military discipline helped me maintain control over my emotions and response. "This isn't the appropriate time or place for this discussion, Connor."
He shrugged dismissively and moved on to engage another group, leaving me shaken by his public challenge. How could he possibly know anything about my classified service record? And why was he so determined to undermine my military service in front of Dad's friends and colleagues? The week following the funeral, Michael contacted both Connor and me about the formal reading of Dad's will. Your father specifically requested that we conduct this proceeding formally in the county courthouse, with Judge Martinez presiding, he explained over the phone. It's an unusual arrangement, but given the complexity of the estate and his explicit instructions, I've scheduled it exactly as he wished. Connor seemed pleased with this news, clearly assuming the formal courthouse setting would lend additional weight to what he believed would be his complete inheritance of the family business. Finally, we can resolve all this uncertainty and get back to running the company the way it should be managed, he said, making no effort to hide his anticipation and confidence. The night before the scheduled will reading, I received an unexpected call from Michael. His voice carried an unusual tone of caution and concern. Arya, I wanted to give you advance warning about tomorrow's proceedings. Your father made very significant changes to his will during the final months before his passing. I cannot discuss any specifics until the formal reading, but I feel you should be mentally prepared. Connor may not react well to what he hears. Did Dad inform Connor about these changes beforehand? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. No, Michael replied after a brief hesitation. He felt that revealing the changes during his final weeks would only create unnecessary conflict and stress during an already difficult time. He specifically asked me to handle the disclosure after his passing. After ending the call, I sat alone in Dad's study, surrounded by photographs and mementos that captured the story of his life. One particular photograph caught my attention. Dad and me at my military commissioning ceremony 6 years earlier. He was beaming with unmistakable pride, his arm wrapped protectively around my shoulders. It was one of the rare occasions when I had seen him look at me with the same expression of pride he usually reserved for Connor.
The next morning, as I was preparing to leave for the courthouse, Connor appeared at Dad's house without warning. He walked through the front door without waiting for an invitation, Sarah following behind him with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We need to talk, Arya," Connor demanded, his tone leaving no room for negotiation or delay. "The will reading is in 45 minutes, Connor. Whatever needs to be discussed can wait until afterward." "No, it absolutely cannot wait." He stepped closer, invading my personal space in what would have been an intimidating manner if I hadn't faced far more dangerous situations during my military service. "I know exactly what you did," he said, his voice low and menacing. "What are you talking about?" I asked, genuinely confused by his accusation. "Don't play innocent with me. I know you manipulated Dad when he was at his most vulnerable. You filled his head with lies about how I was supposedly mismanaging his precious company, turned him against his own son." "That's completely untrue, Connor. Dad made his own decisions based on his own observations and judgments." He scoffed dismissively. "Right. And I suppose it's just pure coincidence that after you show up playing the perfect daughter, suddenly Dad starts meeting with lawyers and changing arrangements that had been settled for decades?" "Connor, honey," Sarah interjected nervously, placing a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. "This isn't helping anyone. Let's just wait and see what the will actually says." He shook off her touch irritably. "No, Sarah, I want her to admit what she did. Dad built that company specifically for me, for we, not for his little sister who couldn't even handle real military combat." The personal attack hit harder than he could possibly know, but I took a deep breath, censoring myself using techniques Victoria had taught me during particularly stressful operations. "I didn't manipulate Dad in any way, Connor. I simply returned home and spent quality time with him. If that experience changed his perspective on certain family dynamics, that was entirely his choice to make. Connor spat the words out like they tasted bitter. You never cared about the business before your deployment. You ran off to play soldier instead of staying here to help when Dad actually needed support. And now you think you can just waltz back in and claim what rightfully belongs to me? I didn't return home for the business, Connor. I came back because my military service was complete and I wanted to reconnect with my family. Family? That's rich coming from you. Where exactly were you when Dad had his first heart episode 2 years ago? Where were you when the business nearly collapsed during the economic downturn? I was here, dealing with everything while you were off on your little overseas adventure. Before I could formulate a response, he pointed an accusatory finger directly at my face. I've been investigating your military service record, Arya. It's very interesting what you can discover with the right professional connections. No military medals, no documented injuries, no records of special assignments or heroic service. For someone who supposedly served in military intelligence during active conflicts, your official record is suspiciously clean and unremarkable. The accusation left me momentarily speechless. Connor couldn't possibly have legitimate access to my classified records, which meant he was working with incomplete information and drawing his own malicious conclusions. My service record is none of your business, Connor, I replied firmly. It absolutely is my business when you use fabricated military heroics to manipulate Dad's emotions, to make yourself appear like some kind of wounded warrior. His face contorted with contempt and disgust. Did you even serve overseas, or was that just another elaborate lie designed to gain sympathy? That's enough. I rarely raised my voice, a habit developed during years of giving and receiving orders in high-stress military situations. The sharp command made both Connor and Sarah visibly flinch. We're going to be late for the will reading. This conversation ends now. As I grabbed my coat and car keys, Connor called after me with barely controlled rage. This isn't finished, Arya. Not even close. When everyone discovers what a complete fraud you really are, you'll regret ever coming back to this town. I walked out without responding, but his venomous words echoed in my mind during the entire drive to the courthouse. On impulse, I called Victoria from my car. I need your assistance, I said, when she answered. My brother is making public accusations about my military service, claiming I'm hiding something or fabricating my entire deployment record. He says he's been investigating my service through professional connections. Victoria's voice immediately turned serious and concerned, Arya. That's troubling on multiple levels. Civilian access to detailed military service records is strictly limited, and if he's somehow obtaining information through unofficial channels, that could constitute a serious federal offense. He mentioned having connections with people who could verify information, I explained, feeling increasingly worried about the implications. Even more concerning, listen carefully, Arya. We need to address this situation immediately, before it escalates further. I can be there by early tomorrow morning. In the meantime, do not engage with his accusations or attempts to provoke you. If he brings up your service record in any public forum, simply state that certain aspects of your military service remain classified for national security reasons. Will that response be sufficient to address his challenges? I asked. It should be adequate for now. I'll bring all the necessary documentation to address this situation properly when I arrive tomorrow. We're not going to let him continue these baseless attacks on your service and sacrifice. As I pulled into the courthouse parking lot, I spotted Connor and Sarah already walking toward the main entrance. Taking a deep breath, I mentally prepared myself for whatever confrontation awaited inside. The county courthouse was an imposing structure of limestone and brick, a remnant of a more formal and dignified era. Courtroom 5, where the will reading was scheduled, was a modest wooden-paneled room with high ceilings and uncomfortable wooden benches that had seen decades of legal proceedings. I arrived exactly 10 minutes early to find Connor and Sarah already seated and prominently in the front row, Michael organizing legal documents on a side table, and Judge Martinez reviewing paperwork at the elevated bench. Michael nodded grimly when he saw me enter, gesturing toward a seat on the opposite side of the courtroom from Connor. Several other people filtered in over the next few minutes. Dad's longtime accountant, his administrative assistant Rebecca, and surprisingly Frank, his former business partner and closest friend. At precisely 10 o'clock, Judge Martinez called the courtroom to order. She was a distinguished woman in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, and reading glasses positioned precisely on her nose. Her presence commanded immediate respect from everyone in the room. "We are gathered here today for the reading of the last will and testaments of William Robert Davidson," she announced in a clear, authoritative voice. "This is an unusual venue for such proceedings, but Mr. Davidson specifically requested judicial oversight of this process, and given his considerable contributions to our community, I agreed to preside over these proceedings." She nodded formally toward Michael. "Counselor, you may begin." Michael stood and cleared his throat, the weight of the moment evident in his careful movements. "Thank you, Your Honor. Before I commence, I must note that William Davidson amended his will approximately 5 months before his passing. The document I am about to read represents his final legal wishes, as properly witnessed and notarized. From my peripheral vision, I observed Connor adjusting in his seat, his expression radiating confidence. He clearly still believed the formal courthouse setting was intended to emphasize the significance of his anticipated inheritance, not to protect the proceedings from potential legal challenges. Michael began reading the standard legal language, establishing Dad's mental competency and voluntary decision-making capacity. Then came the specific individual bequests, personal items distributed to various friends, a substantial donation to the local Veterans Support Organization, and generous financial gifts to several longtime employees who had served the company faithfully. "To my son, Connor Davidson," Michael continued, his voice steady and professional, "I leave 48% of the shares in Davidson Development Corporation, with the explicit stipulation that all major business decisions require full board approval and a majority vote." The words hung in the air for a moment before their full implication became crystal clear. Not the controlling interest Connor had confidently expected, but a significant minority stake. I glanced sideways to see his confident smile falter, confusion spreading rapidly across his features. "To my daughter, Aria Davidson," Michael read, maintaining his professional composure. "I leave 52% of the shares in Davidson Development Corporation and the position of Chief Executive Officer and Chairperson of the Board of Directors." The courtroom went completely silent, except for the quiet hum of the ventilation system. I felt as though I couldn't draw breath. Dad had left me controlling interest in the company, the legacy he had always indicated would belong exclusively to Connor. "This is absolutely ridiculous." Connor's voice shattered the stunned silence. He shot to his feet abruptly, pointing an accusatory finger directly at me. "She knows absolutely nothing about real estate development or business management. This decision makes no logical sense whatsoever. Mr. Davidson, sit down immediately," Judge Martinez ordered with sharp authority. "Emotional outbursts will not be tolerated in my courtroom." Connor remained standing, his face flushed red with anger and disbelief. "Your Honor, my father was clearly not in his right mind when he made these drastic changes. My sister systematically manipulated him during his illness and vulnerability." "That's a very serious accusation, Mr. Davidson," Judge Martinez replied coldly. Do you have concrete evidence to support such claims? Yes, I absolutely do. Connor turned to glance at me with undisguised hatred. She appeared suddenly after 8 years of complete absence when Dad was at his most vulnerable and isolated. She has zero experience in real estate development, no business management background whatsoever. There's no logical reason for him to leave her controlling interest unless she deliberately manipulated his emotions and judgment. Michael interjected professionally. Your Honor, I can personally attest that William Davidson was completely sound of mind when he made these changes. He provided clear, detailed rationale for his decisions, which I thoroughly documented according to legal protocol. What possible rationale could justify this decision? Connor demanded, his voice rising dangerously. Michael looked to Judge Martinez, who nodded her permission for him to elaborate. Mr. Davidson expressed that he had carefully reevaluated both children's respective strengths and capabilities after spending significant time with his daughter following her military service. He believed that her proven leadership experience, analytical skills, and ethical approach to business management would best serve the long-term interests of the company and its dedicated employees. Connor's laugh was bitter and filled with contempt. Leadership experience, ethical approach? She was nothing more than a paper-pushing bureaucrat in some administrative role, if she even accomplished that much during her supposed military service. He paused dramatically, then delivered his most damaging accusation. No benefits, no claims. She's a fake veteran, he declared loudly, his voice echoing off the courtroom walls. The accusation stunned everyone in the room into complete silence. Even Sarah looked mortified and shocked by her husband's public outburst and personal attack. Mr. Davidson, Judge Martinez's voice cracked like a whip through the silence. That is absolutely enough. You will control yourself immediately. But Connor was beyond any reasonable restraint now, pulling folded papers from his inside jacket pocket with trembling hands. I have official documentation, Your Honor. I had a professional contact at the Veterans Administration Office verify her military records. No combat service documentation, no injury reports, no special commendations or awards, absolutely nothing that would justify the kind of exceptional leadership experience that supposedly impressed my father so deeply. He thrust the papers aggressively toward the judge's bench. She's been systematically lying to Dad, to everyone in this community about her military service, playing the wounded warrior hero when she probably never even left a comfortable desk job stateside. And she used that completely fabricated heroism to turn my father against his own son. My mind was racing frantically. How had Connor managed to obtain any information from the Veterans Administration? Even if it was merely confirmation of what wasn't included in my public records, accessing that information without my explicit consent was almost certainly illegal. Your Honor, I began, my voice steadier than I actually felt inside. Certain aspects of my military service remain classified for national security reasons. The absence of specific information in standard administrative records doesn't mean what my brother is suggesting or implying. Connor scoffed loudly and dismissively. How convenient. Classified missions, special secret operations. This isn't some Hollywood action movie, Aria. Stop lying to everyone. At that precise moment, the courtroom doors opened decisively, and Victoria strode in, immaculate in her dress uniform, adorned with the distinctive insignia of her rank and numerous service medals that caught the light from the overhead fixtures.
All heads turned simultaneously at Victoria's commanding entrance. Her military bearing was unmistakable, every step precise and purposeful as she approached the bench with a kind of confidence that comes from years of leadership in life-or-death situations. Forgive the interruption, Your Honor,
she said, addressing Judge Martinez with appropriate respect while maintaining her authoritative presence. I am Lieutenant Colonel Victoria Chen, United States Army. I served as Miss Davidson's commanding officer and am currently representing her as military legal counsel. Judge Martinez raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by this unexpected development. This is highly unusual, Lieutenant Colonel. May I inquire about the specific purpose of your presence in these proceedings? I received credible information that Miss Davidson's military service record was being mischaracterized and potentially compromised in these legal proceedings, Victoria replied with military precision. Given the highly classified nature of certain aspects of her service, I felt immediate intervention was necessary to protect both her reputation and national security interests. Victoria withdrew a sealed envelope from her military briefcase, the official government seals clearly visible, even from a distance. I have documentation from the Department of Defense that may be directly relevant to these proceedings and the accusations being made. She handed the sealed envelope to the court bailiff, who passed it formally to Judge Martinez. As the judge carefully broke the official seals and began reading the contents, the courtroom remained completely silent, all eyes fixed intently on her changing facial expression. I watched as her expression transformed from professional interest to obvious surprise, and then to something approaching genuine awe and respect. Finally, she looked up, her gaze meeting mine briefly, before she addressed the entire courtroom. This court will take an immediate 15-minute recess, she announced with gravity. Lieutenant Colonel Chen, Miss Davidson, and Mr. Davidson, please remain in the courtroom. Everyone else is temporarily excused from these proceedings. As the others filed out with confused expressions and whispered conversations, Connor approached Victoria with obvious aggression and hostility. Who exactly are you really? What kind of elaborate stunt is this supposed to be? He demanded, stepping uncomfortably close to her. Victoria's response was coolly professional, her military training evident in every controlled movement. I assure you, Mr. Davidson, this is absolutely no stunt or deception. I have served alongside your sister in circumstances and situations you cannot begin to comprehend or imagine. Once the room was cleared of all observers except for the four of us, Judge Martinez spoke again with increased solemnity. Officers, seal this courtroom immediately, she called to the bailiffs positioned at the entrance doors. They complied without hesitation, securing the entrance and posting themselves as guards outside the courtroom. The judge removed her reading glasses and looked directly at Connor with unmistakable sternness. Mr. Davidson, the accusations you have made against your sister are not only completely false, but potentially damaging to ongoing national security operations and classified intelligence work. She turned to me, her expression softening noticeably with genuine respect. Miss Davidson, the contents of this envelope explain a great deal that cannot and will not be publicly acknowledged due to security classifications. I want to personally express my gratitude for your extraordinary service to our nation. Connor looked frantically between all of us, confusion and mounting panic warring visibly on his face. What exactly is happening here? What information is contained in that envelope? He demanded desperately. Judge Martinez regarded him with stern disapproval. What I am about to share with you cannot leave this secured room under any circumstances. Is that completely understood by everyone present? We all nodded solemnly, though Connor did so with obvious reluctance and growing dread. Ms. Davidson's military service included classified operations of the highest sensitivity level available to our armed forces, the judge began carefully. Her actions during one particular mission saved numerous American and Allied lives while providing intelligence information that proved critical to ongoing national security operations. Connor's mouth opened and closed repeatedly, but no words emerged from his shocked silence. Due to the extraordinary classified nature of her service, the judge continued with measured gravity, most of Miss Davidson's military records are permanently sealed at the highest levels of government classification. The documentation provided by Lieutenant Colonel Chen confirms that Ms. Davidson received one of our nation's highest military honors in a private ceremony, again due to the classified nature of the operations involved. She fixed Connor with a penetrating stare that seemed to see directly through him. In summary, Mr. Davidson, your sister is a genuine American hero whose sacrifices and contributions to our national security cannot be publicly acknowledged for reasons of ongoing operational security. Your father was made aware of these facts through proper official channels before making any amendments to his will. The color drained completely from Connor's face as the devastating implications of this revelation sank in thoroughly. Not only was I not a fraudulent veteran, but I had served our country in ways that had earned recognition at the highest levels of military command, recognition that could never be publicly displayed, discussed, or acknowledged. I had no way of knowing any of this, he stammered, weakly, looking genuinely shaken for the first time since I had known him as an adult. No, you didn't know, Victoria replied, with measured evenness. And yet you chose to make serious public accusations based on incomplete information, potentially compromising operational security protocols, and certainly causing unwarranted distress to a highly decorated combat veteran. Judge Martinez carefully gathered all the papers back into the official envelope and sealed it again with new security tape. In light of this information, Mr. Davidson, do you wish to continue challenging your father's will and the decisions he made based on complete and accurate information? Connor slumped heavily into his courtroom seat, all the fight and arrogance completely gone from his defeated posture. No, Your Honor, I will not contest the will any further. Excellent. Then we will resume normal proceedings and complete the reading of the will without any additional interruptions or unfounded accusations to your sister's character or service record.
As the other attendees were called back into the courtroom, Connor avoided my gaze entirely, staring down at his hands with the posture of someone whose entire worldview had just collapsed. The rest of the will reading proceeded without any further incident, with Michael detailing the remaining provisions of Dad's comprehensive estate plan. When the proceedings concluded, Connor hurried out of the courtroom without speaking to anyone, not even his wife. Sarah hesitated at the doorway, then approached me with obvious uncertainty and embarrassment. Arya, I had absolutely no idea about any of this classified information, she said quietly, glancing nervously toward the exit where Connor had disappeared. What Connor said today, the accusations he made, I want you to know I didn't support any of it. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen to reason. I nodded, too emotionally drained from the day's revelations to offer more than that simple acknowledgement. Sarah hurried after her husband, leaving me alone with Victoria and the weight of everything that had just transpired. Victoria placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. Are you holding up okay after all that drama? I will be, I replied, though the full impact of the day's events was still settling into my consciousness. Dad had known. Somehow he had discovered the truth about my classified service. And in his final act as my father, he had acknowledged what he could never say publicly, that he was genuinely proud of me, that he trusted my judgment, that he finally saw my true worth. As we left the courthouse together, I felt a complex mixture of vindication and profound sorrow. The recognition I had sought for so many years had finally come, but at the terrible price of losing my father and potentially destroying any chance of future reconciliation with my brother. The aftermath of the will reading unfolded in ways I never could have predicted or imagined. As Victoria and I exited the courthouse, reporters from the local newspaper and radio station approached us, clearly having been tipped off that something significant had occurred in courtroom 5. Michael handled their questions with professional skill, explaining that Judge Martinez had validated William Davidson's will and that I would be assuming leadership of Davidson Development as per my father's carefully considered wishes. Ms. Davidson brings valuable leadership experience from her distinguished military service, Michael told the gathered media.
carefully avoiding any mention of classified details or security issues. William believed strongly that her vision for the company aligned perfectly with the core values upon which he originally built the business. The reporters pressed for more specific information about the closed-door portion of the proceedings, but Michael remained diplomatically firm in his responses. Certain court records related to today's will reading have been sealed by judicial order for security reasons. That's all I'm authorized to share at this time, he stated definitively. Once we were safely away from the media attention, Victoria suggested we continue our conversation at my apartment to discuss next steps and potential damage control measures. We need to address the broader implications of today's events, she explained as we drove away from the courthouse. Your brother's public accusations may have been contained to that courtroom today, but there's no guarantee he won't attempt to discuss this matter with others in the community. Back in my apartment, Victoria laid out the situation with military directness and clarity. The Department of Defense is seriously concerned about any potential breach of classified information protocols. The fact that your brothers somehow managed to access even redacted portions of your Veterans Administration records is deeply troubling and requires investigation. He mentioned having professional connections at the VA office, I recalled, feeling increasingly worried about the legal implications. Victoria nodded with obvious concern. We're actively investigating that particular angle right now. Unauthorized access to veterans' records, even limited access, constitutes a serious federal offense with significant penalties. What happens to me now in terms of my status and security clearance? I asked, genuinely worried about potential consequences. Officially, nothing changes regarding your public record or civilian status. You remain a veteran with honorable service and no publicly acknowledged special commendations or classified injuries, Victoria explained with a slight smile. Unofficially, additional security measures have been implemented to ensure that if anyone else attempts to access your records the way your brother did, they'll encounter substantially enhanced protective barriers. And what about Connor? Will he face legal consequences for accessing my private records? Victoria's expression turned notably more serious. That depends entirely on how he obtained the information and what actions he takes moving forward. If he continues making public accusations about your classified service, more direct federal intervention may become necessary. The next morning, I received a formal call from Judge Martinez's office requesting my immediate presence for a private follow-up meeting. When I arrived at the courthouse, I found not only the judge, but also a representative from the Department of Defense I hadn't previously met, a stern-looking man in his 50s who introduced himself simply as Agent Phillips. Miss Davidson, Judge Martinez began once we were seated in her private chambers. I wanted to follow up personally on yesterday's unprecedented proceedings. The situation involving your brother is highly unusual and potentially problematic from multiple national security perspectives. Agent Phillips took over the conversation smoothly. We've determined that your brother obtained limited information about your Veterans Administration records through a college acquaintance who currently works in records administration. While highly inappropriate and potentially illegal, the unauthorized access was restricted to confirming what was not included in your standard public records, rather than accessing any actual classified material. Is his friend going to be prosecuted for this violation? I asked, concerned about the broader implications. That matter is being handled through separate administrative and legal channels, Agent Phillips replied, his tone making it clear he wouldn't provide additional details. Our immediate concern is ensuring your brother fully understands the sensitivity of this situation and the serious consequences of discussing classified matters, even through implication or speculation. Judge Martinez leaned forward slightly. I've scheduled a mandatory private meeting with Connor this afternoon. Agent Phillips will be present to impress upon him the seriousness of his actions and the critical importance of maintaining discretion moving forward. Will I need to be present for that meeting? The thought of facing Connor again so soon after yesterday's confrontation was emotionally exhausting. That won't be necessary, the judge assured me. In fact, it would probably be counterproductive if you were there. This meeting is primarily focused on ensuring he understands the legal ramifications of his actions and the absolute importance of discretion regarding classified national security matters. Later that afternoon, I received a brief text message from an unknown number that I assumed was Agent Phillips. Meeting completed successfully. Subject fully understands situation and consequences. Contact immediately if any problems arise. The cryptic but professional message was oddly reassuring in its military-style brevity and formality.
2 days after the courthouse confrontation, I entered the Davidson Development offices for the first time as majority shareholder and chief executive officer. The receptionist, Linda, who had worked faithfully for Dad for over 15 years, greeted me with a warm, genuine embrace. "Your father would be absolutely beaming with pride right now," she whispered emotionally. "He talked about you constantly, you know. He kept every single letter you sent from overseas in his desk drawer, reading them whenever he had difficult days." Her revelation brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Even during the periods when I had felt most distant and disconnected from him, Dad had kept me close to his heart in ways I never realized or understood. The company's management team had been formally notified of the change in leadership structure, and most welcomed me with professional courtesy mixed with understandable apprehension about working under new leadership. Connor's office was conspicuously empty, and had been since the will reading. As I settled into Dad's former office, now officially mine, Michael arrived with the final legal paperwork required to transfer controlling interest in the company to me officially. "Have you heard anything from Connor since yesterday's events?" I asked as we completed the signing process. Michael shook his head thoughtfully. "Not directly from him personally. His attorney contacted me yesterday afternoon to formally confirm that he won't be contesting the will beyond what occurred in court. Beyond that communication, complete silence." A full week passed with absolutely no word from my brother. I began the challenging process of learning the business comprehensively from the ground up, meeting with department heads, reviewing all ongoing projects, and thoroughly understanding the company's current financial position and future prospects. The veteran hiring initiative that Dad and I had discussed became my first major policy implementation as the new CEO. 10 days after the dramatic will reading, Connor finally called. His voice over the phone was subdued and lacked the aggressive edge I had grown accustomed to over the years. "We need to talk, Arya." "In person," he said quietly. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a small family-owned coffee shop downtown that neither of us had ever frequented before. When I arrived, Connor was already seated in a corner booth, looking distinctly uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," he began awkwardly as I sat across from him. "What did you want to discuss?" I kept my tone professional and neutral, genuinely unsure of his intentions or motivations. Connor fidgeted nervously with his coffee cup, a stark contrast to his usual confident demeanor. "First, and most importantly, I owe you a sincere and complete apology. What I said in that courtroom, the accusations I made against your character and service, they were completely out of line and unforgivable." I nodded acknowledgement, but didn't immediately respond, waiting to see if there was more substance to his apparent change of heart. "I genuinely didn't know," he continued with obvious difficulty, "about your real military service, I mean. The judge and that government agent, they explained enough for me to understand just how wrong I was about everything. You could have simply asked me directly, Connor, instead of illegally investigating my private records," I pointed out. He had the decency to look genuinely ashamed. "I know that now. I was angry and desperate after Dad started changing, becoming closer to you than he'd ever been. I convinced myself you must be manipulating him somehow, using false claims about your military experience to gain his sympathy and support. Dad changed because he finally got to know me as the adult I had become, Connor, not because I manipulated or deceived him in any way. I can see that now, clearly, he admitted. They showed me something, not specific operational details, but a heavily redacted official report, just enough to make it absolutely clear that whatever you accomplished overseas was real, significant, and genuinely heroic. This was new information to me. Apparently, Agent Phillips had decided that Connor needed more concrete proof than just verbal assurances to fully understand the gravity of his mistakes. The thing is, Connor continued with painful honesty, I've spent my entire adult life being William Davidson's son and heir apparent. That identity became who I was fundamentally. When I realized he was changing his succession plan, giving you control instead of me, I couldn't handle the psychological blow. It felt like he was rejecting everything I had worked for, everything I thought he valued about me. For the first time, I could genuinely see the situation from Connor's perspective. His entire sense of self-worth had been built around being Dad's chosen successor. My return and Dad's subsequent change of heart had completely shattered that foundational identity. Dad didn't reject you or your contributions, Connor. He simply recognized that we both possess different strengths and capabilities. He still valued your experience and dedication, which is why you received 48% of the company rather than being excluded entirely. But not controlling interest, he said quietly, the pain still evident in his voice. No, I acknowledged honestly, not controlling interest in the company. We sat in contemplative silence for several moments. The years of competition and fundamental misunderstanding between us almost tangible in the space between us. What happens now? He finally asked. With the company's future direction, I mean. That depends significantly on your decisions and attitude. I'm learning the business as rapidly as possible, but your operational experience and industry knowledge are genuinely valuable assets. There's definitely room for both of us at Davidson Development if you're willing to work within the new structure. The surprise on his face was unmistakable. You would actually want me to remain involved after everything that's happened between us? You've built your professional life around this company, Connor. I won't take that away from you unnecessarily, but the operational dynamics will be different. Major decisions will be made collaboratively with full board approval, and the veteran hiring program is absolutely non-negotiable. He nodded slowly, processing the implications. I can work within those parameters. It'll require significant adjustment on my part, but I'm willing to try if you are.
It wasn't a complete reconciliation between us. Too much damage had been done over too many years for that kind of immediate healing. But it represented a genuine beginning, a foundation we could potentially build upon. As we prepared to leave the coffee shop, Connor hesitated, then awkwardly extended his hand toward me. For what it's worth, Arya, I am truly sorry for everything, and I want you to know that I'm genuinely proud to have a sister who served our country with the kind of distinction you did, even if I can never know all the details. I accepted his handshake, the first genuine physical contact between us in years. Thank you, Connor. That acknowledgement means more to me than you could possibly understand. As I watched him walk away toward his car, I realized that Dad's final decision had accomplished something neither Connor nor I had anticipated. It had forced us to confront the broken relationship we had ignored and avoided for so long, and taken the first tentative steps toward healing those deep wounds. That evening, I called Victoria to update her on my unexpected meeting with Connor. He actually apologized sincerely, she asked, sounding genuinely impressed. That's considerably more than I expected given his behavior in court. It surprised me too, I admitted. I think whatever Agent Phillips showed him made quite a significant impact on his understanding of the situation. Sometimes people need to see concrete evidence before they can accept truths that fundamentally challenge their worldview, Victoria replied wisely. Do you believe he'll honor his commitment to discretion about your classified service? I do, she said confidently. The Department of Defense doesn't handle these security matters casually. Your brother may be stubborn and self-centered, but he's not stupid. He clearly understands the serious consequences of violating national security protocols. As I ended the call, I felt a psychological weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The classified nature of my military service had always created an invisible barrier between me and civilian life, a crucial part of myself I could never fully share or explain. Now, at least within the confines of that courthouse and its aftermath, my sacrifice had been officially acknowledged and validated. More importantly, it had been recognized by the two people whose approval I had sought most desperately throughout my life, my father and my brother. The months that followed brought changes I could never have anticipated when I first returned from military service. Taking control of Davidson Development meant stepping into a leadership role I hadn't specifically prepared for, but my military experience proved surprisingly applicable to business management, strategic planning, personnel leadership, crisis response, resource allocation. These skills transferred more readily than I had expected to the corporate world. My first major initiative as CEO was formally launching the comprehensive veteran hiring program Dad and I had discussed during our evening conversations. We partnered with local Veterans Administration offices and military transition services to create structured pathways for former service members to enter the real estate development industry, providing specialized training, mentorship, and career advancement opportunities. Within 8 months, we had successfully hired 37 veterans in various roles throughout the company, from project management and financial analysis to skilled construction trades and administrative support. The program's success attracted positive media attention and recognition from both military and business organizations. Connor and I gradually established a functional, if sometimes tense, working relationship. He continued overseeing the day-to-day operational aspects of ongoing projects, while I focused on strategic direction, company culture development, and long-term growth planning. Our monthly board meetings were occasionally challenging but ultimately productive. True to his commitment, he never again questioned my military service or my authority to lead the company. The physical and emotional scars from my classified service remained constant companions. On particularly difficult days, when the chronic pain in my shoulder was intense, or when unexpected loud noises triggered vivid memories of that distant explosion, I would retreat to Dad's old fishing cabin by the lake for solitude and reflection. 6 months after assuming leadership of the company, I finally took Victoria's long-standing advice and joined a specialized support group for veterans with classified service histories. The group met monthly in a secure facility 2 hours away, providing a rare environment where we could speak freely about experiences that remained hidden from the rest of our world. The most challenging aspect, shared Robert, a former Navy SEAL with similarly classified service, is carrying the psychological weight of experiences you can never fully explain, even to those you love most deeply. His words resonated powerfully with my own experience. In that room, surrounded by others who understood the unique burden of unacknowledged sacrifice, I found a level of healing that had eluded me elsewhere. On the second anniversary of Dad's death, I established the William Davidson Memorial Foundation, dedicated to supporting veterans transitioning to civilian careers. Using a substantial portion of my inheritance and ongoing company profits, the foundation provided educational scholarships, professional training programs, and business startup grants for former military personnel. At the foundation's public launch event, I delivered my first major speech as head of Davidson Development. Without revealing any classified details, I spoke about the unique challenges veterans face when returning to civilian life, particularly those whose most significant contributions remain unacknowledged due to security constraints. Some sacrifices are celebrated with medals and public parades. Others happen in silence, known only to those who make them and the few authorized to know. Both types of service are equally valuable and equally worthy of our support and respect. As I concluded my speech that day, I thought about Dad's final gift for me. Not just the company or financial security, but something far more precious. Recognition at last of my true worth as his daughter and as a person who'd served something greater than herself. Sometimes the most meaningful victories are the ones that happen quietly, witnessed only by those who matter most. And sometimes that's exactly enough. If you've ever had to prove your worth to someone who refused to see it, share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be fighting similar battles. Remember, your struggle matters even when it goes unrecognized.